Call the February 25th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Borowitz. Alderman Brooks will be absent. Crawford.
Here.
Frank.
Here.
Freeman.
Here.
Porter.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Here.
Sanderson.
Here.
Snow.
Here.
Stevens. Seven present.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Under public comment, we have an election tomorrow, and I would encourage everybody that has an election, a primary in their ward, to go and vote. Exercise your right, sacred right of all Americans. Also, we have the Northern Illinois cleanup coming up. Did I hand out last week some flyers? Oh, okay. Yeah, they're in your packets then?
Yep.
I need to know if any of you are going to volunteer, who that one might be, because I need to order the picker-uppers and the gloves and all that kind of thing, so. No, it's for us here. I mean, our volunteers do it here. We base it out of City Hall, and sometimes we have kids from the high schools, and they do it in their own home neighborhoods and stuff, so we just need to know how much stuff we need. Under public forum, we have none this evening, and we have no one signed up to make public comment I'm aware of. Under reports, officers, boards, and special committees, we have some items that will be covered by our planner, Gina Del Rose. Ms. Del Rose.
Mr. Caldwell sends his regrets. He is out of town today, but 2 of his previously approved special uses were up for extension. The iron and coal project that was in the junkyard across the street, he is still working on the logistics and engineering of that. And he's had other projects occupy his time, so he is requesting a 1-year extension for that project. And then the car wash that was going to take place next to Speedway. If you remember last fall, there was a subdivision plat to subdivide the 2 large lots into like 10 smaller ones. The applicant has not recorded that plat yet, and until that plat gets recorded, they can't sell the property to Mr. Caldwell to do his car wash. So he's really at the mercy of the subdivider at this point. I have been in pretty constant communication with the subdivider, and he is hoping to have that done within the next month. So Mr. Caldwell is asking for an extension on that as well. And then for the funeral home special use, Mr. Anderson is here if you have questions for him. I will say that there have been site plans submitted for that, so we are getting that ball rolling. That just won't be approved before the time frame is up.
Well, we want to take these one at a time, and I'll need a motion and a second when we do address them. George, did you have something?
I was asking if
Okay.
it's going to be all together.
No, we're not going to do an omnibus. So under A, special use extension for iron and coal, I need a motion to approve. Motion by Alderman Sanderson, second by Alderman Frank. Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is forward to City Council with final disposition. Under item B, for the car wash near Speedway and the gas station, a motion to approve. By Alderman Sanderson, second by Alderman Ratcliffe. Questions, comments, further discussion? Yes, sir.
Oh, I just have one. How long does this extend it out then?
1 year.
1 year. Additional questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved and forwarded to City Council. And under item C, Anderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services LLC, may I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Alderman Crawford, second by Alderman Snow. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Forward to City Council for final disposition. Okay. Under public safety, unfinished business, we have none. Under, oh, Marty, hi, it's good to see you back. good to see you back, Marty. Okay. Yeah, okay. Under Public Safety, new business. First of all, we have a VIP check presentation. Tim, you want to, Deputy Chief, whoever's,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could have Deputy Chief Wallace and Officer Blankenship come up with the VIPs to present to the mayor, the council, and the city a check in honor of the hours that the VIPs put in this year.
Oh, come on, Marty.
down a bit.
All right. Good evening, Alderman, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it brief because I know that you guys have a whole bunch on your agenda tonight, but just really quick, I know every month you guys approve expenditures for our VIPs for various different things, dinners, beverages, uniforms, all kinds of different things. And the command staff felt that it was important for you guys to see what you're getting for that money. Without the VIPs, there's numerous events throughout the year that they just wouldn't happen within the city. For the fire department, for the police department, we just wouldn't be able to afford to be able to put these events on. It would just be too cost prohibitive. Our group of volunteers, they're 60 strong, they volunteer all of these hours and they never complain. You know, they do the things that we wish we could get employees to do every day. So on behalf of all of our VIPs, we'd like to present this honorary check to Mayor Chamberlain in the amount of $58,286.25. This check represents the 1,786 hours our volunteers have provided to the city this last year. This would have been the cost of paying for a police officer or officers to do the events that they did for us for free. So thank you to our VIPs and thank you for your time.
Simple words don't express. I see you guys out there at every parade, and every time we have any kind of event in the community where we need somebody to help people find out where to go and where not to go. Bottom of my heart, thank you so much. It really is. It's more than just the money saved, but that's an important thing to recognize. $58,286. It's the spirit of the community that you bring to the community and giving people the opportunity to serve community in capacity. This is very important. So thanks again. Thank you very much. Please note that Alderman Stevens is joining us. Next up under B, we have the Police Department Annual Report. I cede the floor to Chief Woody. Chief Woody, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the sake of preserving time, I've done a modified presentation. Shouldn't take any more than 1 to 2 hours. So, no, just joking. The council has our entire annual report, but paper clipped to the front of it is the modified report of approximately 14 slides that I'll go over in more detail. The whole report itself will be listed on the city's website as well as the Belvedere Police Department Facebook page if you want to go on and look at the PowerPoint and look at the annual report in more detail. So having said that, we'll go ahead and begin.
Would you like the lights on or off? Ooh, we can see that.
Yeah, can everybody see that? Otherwise, yeah. Okay. We'll start with the department incident reports. This is the transcription reports that our transcriptionists are responsible for. And you can see in 2018, our transcriptionists transcribed over 2,500 reports on average. From year to year, it's approximately 2,500 reports. This does not include all of the accident reports that get done, as well as the reports that officers enter when our transcriptionists are on vacation, or detective reports that get done by hand as well. 2018 activity analysis by day of the week. I'd just like to point out the total at the bottom there. For these specific calls for service, we have over 25,000 calls for service that we handle, but that's just a fraction of the overall total reports and calls for service that we handle. We actually, for 2018, had over 41,000 calls for service for the year. Any questions about that slide? Moving on to crime statistics, I know we may be better off just taking a look at the paperwork in front of us. It's a little small. This is something different than we've done in previous years. Previous years, you see those categories in bold. That would be typically what you would see, and then you would see the total number at the bottom there. I've tried to break that down to give you a better idea of what types of offenses we're seeing. The types of numbers that we're seeing associated with those offenses. It's the same thing that we look at to try and identify patterns within crime statistics to see if there's increases, decreases, areas of concern, areas we need to address, so on and so forth. But in addition to that, I wanted to give you a better perspective. I tried finding communities our size and compare their crime statistics with ours. Unfortunately, the FBI doesn't update theirs often enough from year to year to give us an accurate representation. So what I tried doing, because crime statistics there is an ebb and flow that's involved from year to year. That very last column is a 5-year average to give you an idea of what we look at over the last 5 years. And it puts the statistics for that particular crime offense into perspective and gives us an idea and you an idea. Is crime up a little bit? Is it down a little bit? Is it on pace for meeting the average, and so forth? Any questions on?
Yes, Alderman Snow.
So, looking at the solicitation of sexual acts, the third or fourth one down, and then I'm assuming is that hooked in with the prostitution and promoting a prostitution? I'm kind of surprised there's just the one solicitation act.
Yeah, that would be the one that we were able to gather enough evidence to charge somebody with that the state's attorney would authorize. But typically the solicitation, prostitution, and promoting prostitution all stem from the prostitution sting we did this year.
Alderman Sanderson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief, criminal sexual assault looks like it came close to doubling. Were there prosecutions on those 15 cases? Do you know how they came out?
Yeah, the criminal sexual assault specifically, a lot of those were either the charges weren't authorized or they were from other jurisdictions. We had overall for sex offenses, we had 22 arrests out of the 61 cases, but a lot of the other ones were either other jurisdictions. They weren't able to get charges authorized. We had some where victims didn't cooperate with the investigation, or the investigation itself is still pending.
Alderman Freeman.
So, Chief, are these all just Belvedere statistics?
Yes, ma'am.
So we went from 19 armed robberies in 2017 to 0 last year?
Yes, that is correct.
Yay.
The drop. Yeah.
Any other questions on that page? Moving on. Assault and battery. Assault is if somebody threatens you and you're receiving a battery, or battery is actually somebody touches you in a insulting or provoking manner, or actually causes physical harm to you, as well as some of the aggravating circumstances within those categories. You see, for the 5-year average, we're looking at about 234, which is the total crime statistic for 2018 for this year. We had approximately 120 of those cases that were closed with arrest. Beyond that, either they were administratively closed where investigative leads had been exhausted, or the victims refused to cooperate, or the state's attorney declined to prosecute.
Alderman Snow.
So in the domestic battery portion, it looks like that went up by almost 20 or 30. What was the, is that just an underreported years past possibly, or?
You know, just like all other crime statistics, it ebbs and flows. There's really no rhyme or reason that we can pinpoint to justify an increase or decrease. We respond to those, and sometimes it depends on whether or not there's a cooperating victim, enough evidence to actually charge, or witnesses that would help substantiate an arrest.
Yes.
So I have a couple for you. So battery, does that constitute, is like threatening someone, is that considered battery too? Like if you get called out to a bar where somebody was threatened but not actually touched, is that battery?
No, that would fall in your category of assault. Battery is a actual touching of somebody in an assaulting or provoking manner, or causing bodily harm.
Okay, and then the hate crimes, is that, would that be like graffiti, like that was done to the Zion Lutheran Church, or is that just, somebody has to be charged with that?
Yeah, hate crime would fall under your causing a battery or something along those lines because of somebody's religion, ethnicity, creed, race, so on and so forth. What you're referring to would be a criminal damage to property.
Anyone else?
If there's no other questions moving forward. Our drug and narcotics offenses, I'll point out, our officers have been proactive in this area. Statistics are relatively comparable from year to year, a little bit of increase from one to another, but this is primarily due to the proactive enforcement that our officers do day to day out on the street. The possession of cannabis, civil ordinance, and possession of drug paraphernalia, both are non-custodial arrestable offenses issued by city ordinance citation, and that's reflected. Otherwise, you have the statistics for the other categories of offenses that are arrestable.
Yes, Alderman Snow.
So do we have a statistic that tells us how many tickets were issued for stuff like cannabis?
That's what those are. The very first and very
Oh, the very
last
top, okay.
offense are, those are city ordinance tickets.
Okay, got it.
If it's okay, I will address weapon law violations. I know if it were me, that's one that I would be interested. We have 19 total offenses, and I would say 98% of our offenses were generated through traffic stops from our officers, where they recovered 5 firearms, 3 brass knuckles, a stun gun, a bludgeon, and ammunition that people illegally possessed in their vehicles while our officers were conducting traffic stops. So that's just one of the reasons why we preach to our officers to go out there, be proactive, not every traffic stop has to be a citation, but every contact can potentially be either a positive contact or an enforcement contact. And we're just trying to keep the drugs, guns, and gangs off our streets. So, any other questions?
Wendy Frank?
Chief, I was wondering if you could go back to the fraud offenses.
Yes, ma'am.
About the counterfeiting and the credit card fraud.
Yes.
Do we have a problem in Belvedere, like, gas station, the credit card device?
As far as skimming, is that what you're referring to? None of these reports are specifically reports of skimming like at our gas pump like you see in the media. We'll get a lot of these from Walmart, where people will come with credit cards that they have somebody else's information already downloaded onto that credit card. They will try and purchase merchandise from our retail establishments. That's where a lot of our credit card fraud come into play. Otherwise, counterfeit can be either the checks that people try to cash that aren't real checks, or every once in a while we will have people try and pass funny money.
Any additional questions?
This next slide is fairly self-explanatory. The curfew is a lot of times our officers being proactive, stopping juveniles after curfew and identifying them as being in violation of city ordinance, things of that nature. They'll conduct city ordinance enforcement, notify the parents, take the juveniles home. Driving under the influence. Oops. Driving under the influence is another category in which our department emphasizes greatly, because we understand the dangers of somebody out there that has consumed too much alcohol and out on our streets with our families and children. But I'd like to point out that approximately 1/3 of our DUI enforcement comes from our IDOT enforcement, which we send out additional details that are granted funds through the Illinois Department of Transportation. So I think that's a significant point to make, because it's just something else that our department tries to do well.
Mark?
Chief, could just it's been a little while since we told the public about our curfew ordinance. Could you just go through that real quick?
Yes.
So that people know what curfew is for their children? It's been
Sure.
a couple of years.
Yeah. During the week, if you're 16, you have to be home by 11. If you're under 16, so 15 and under, it has to be 10. During the weekend, it's midnight and 11. So if it's 16, it's midnight, and if it's under 16, it's 11.
Unless you're accompanied by your parents.
Oh, correct. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could be accompanied by a parent or a legal guardian or family member that you have permission to be with as well. Yep. Any other questions?
I had one.
Oh, I went back one.
Missing persons. That's a pretty big number, I think. 30 people went missing. That doesn't account for ones we found, though, right?
I'm
Or is
sorry,
that
I was.
reported missing.
You talking the runaway?
Well, it's a total of 30 missing, adult or runaways, total.
Yeah.
30 people went missing.
Those would all be recovered individuals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have an individual that has been reported missing and hasn't been recovered at this point.
Good work. Anybody else?
I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Oh, yep. Not sure how I got there, but I got there. So, death investigations, that's primarily going to be natural deaths. Some of the death investigation or other sudden deaths, 7 of those, as you see listed just underneath, which are labeled overdose deaths. 2 are fentanyl, 1 heroin, 1 alcohol-related, and 3 polydrug, which are multiple drugs, all of which included fentanyl. So I understand that the opioid crisis is really linked with heroin, but ultimately, yeah, heroin is, a nasty, nasty drug that is an epidemic. But once we started to see fentanyl coming on the scene and carfentanil, it's significantly changed the game of narcotics and is one of the primary reasons why we start to see overdoses and overdose-related deaths. So that is 7 of those, 10 for death investigation or other sudden. The other 3 should have been relabeled as natural causes. It technically was 22 natural causes, 7 which are our overdose deaths, which, as I previously stated, are listed individuals that any questions on that. Suicide is just what it is. We have one by hanging and another one with carbon monoxide. Attempted, our officers deal with people that are either attempting or threatening suicide. They do it with quite frequency, and it's one of the things that is one of the reasons why the state requires mental health training these days, and it's one of the changes in law enforcement that we've had to really adapt to, because we're dealing with many, many more people that are in a situation where either they're threatening, attempting, or have committed suicide. So it's tragic. And then the very last category, overdose. Did some data checking today, and of those overdoses, which is 22, 13 of them had to be Narcan. And some of them had to be Narcan multiple times. So, but ultimately, those are the overdoses that survived. Of the other 22, either they were responsive when officers got there, or the overdose was of something that didn't necessarily render them unconscious. So, any other questions, or any questions on that one? The next few slides are more for your reference. It just gives you an idea. One, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, it tells you what the graph pertains to, and then how many incidences we had throughout 2018. And then the individual dots are their correlation on the map. Yeah, you can see it's pretty well a shotgun approach throughout Belvedere for domestics. Here it had 537. Now understand that's calls for service. So somebody reports a domestic, whether or not we get there and identify it and classify it as a domestic is something else. And then as you saw previously, how many domestic batteries we had would be a separate category. So we could go someplace that's, because 2 people are arguing, gets reported as a domestic, but ultimately doesn't rise to the level of any enforcement action. So if there's no questions on that, I'll continue. Next one, alarms that our officers handle throughout the year, 502. After 3 in a month, the city does charge different businesses or residents for violation of those alarms, city ordinance.
Alderman Snow.
And so when it comes to alarms, do we have are most of the alarms that go off false alarms? as opposed to being valid, hey, there was an attempted break-in, or there appeared to be potential foul play occurring?
Yeah, majority of our alarms are false. We try not to take that approach, obviously, because we don't want to get complacent. It all as if they're valid, but yes, the ultimate result is that most of our alarms, if not a great percentage, are false. I think it's, what, $30, do you remember? I'd have to look. I don't recall off the top of my head. Sorry.
Do you still accommodate direct dial to PD then for alarms then?
Accommodate what?
Direct dial from the alarm company to 911 or the police station?
No, I don't believe they
They have to
have.
dial the phone? So they have to dial in? That,
Typically, it's the alarm company.
okay. Yes, Marcia?
So I had a question about the residential burglaries. Do you find that these are just random people breaking into houses, or are most of these burglaries done by an acquaintance, a family member that knows the owners are out or on vacation, or is it just random?
It's a mixture of both. We have some that we're able to identify a suspect right off the bat because the homeowner is able to identify a suspect that they think might be responsible, and then there's others that they can't think of anybody that would possibly be, willing or able to do something like that. So, that's where we really rely on our detectives processing the crime scene, getting fingerprints, and DNA where it's available, and hopefully we can get something to tie somebody to that particular crime scene that's not supposed to be there. So.
Yes.
And what's the success rate for every 100 burglaries?
As far as a solve rate, I don't have those statistics. Again, like with other potential crimes, it ebbs and flows. It just kind of depends on the preservation of the scene, the information that we're able to get. If anybody's has video from either their surveillance camera, one of the neighbors, depends. Just depends. Any other questions on residential burglaries? And this slide is crashes. And when we do IDOT details, when we do stationary details, we identify and target intersections that are going to be our intersections with the most types of crashes. And PI is personal injury at the bottom there, and you see that's 38. PD is property damage only. So I guess for lack of better terminology, probably your less severe impacts that aren't as high in speed, things of that nature.
Yes, Alderman Sanderson.
I'm wondering if our departments with the Public Works get together when we have, you can see where there's little clusters of things to make sure we have proper signals and signage and things like that. Is there any way that do you go over that stuff too, Brent, or?
Yeah, we get our accident statistics from IDOT, and we go through those. IDOT has an annual program for high hazard intersections. If we qualify for that kind of work, which we haven't done for a number of years. But yes, we do review that on an annual basis.
And I know I've worked with Danny on a couple occasions where we'll have citizens request certain signage or changes in traffic control at certain intersections. We'll pull data for the last 5 years to see if it supports those changes.
Alderman Snow.
Possibly related to this, obviously Pearl Street and Grant Highway appear to have a lot of accidents. Whatever happened to getting rid of the frontage road and having it go between the Kmart and the grocery store?
1.5 million is what happened.
Is it still out there per se?
No, it's not.
Well, it's that proposal will come about when the traffic dictates that, and that'll be generated, determined by IDOT.
So no.
And then the next slide is related to this. This is the intersections with the highest rate of impact crashes. And this is what we use as a guide when we go ahead and do details and do enforcement that we try and localize. So.
There will be a light at Lawrenceville and Poplar Grove Road when they complete the bridge project.
Be a four-way stop.
It's a four-way stop, not a light now? Okay.
Correct.
Unless there's questions there, I'll continue on to the last slide. And I just would like to pay homage to Chief Noble and his retirement. So I appreciate your guys' time and focus, and if you have any questions that maybe come up later, you do have the entire annual report. Otherwise, everybody should be able to get a hold of me at the police department if there's a question after the fact. I'd be more than happy to do what I could to answer it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything for the chief? Okay, next up we have the fire chief with acceptance of $500 for his centerfold photo and Firehouse Magazine.
Thanks, Mayor. This is in recognition of the March 10th, 2017 fatal multifamily structure fire we had in Belvedere. Belvedere Fire personnel rescued 8 occupants from 819 West Jackson with the help of numerous other public safety officials as well. Dear Valor Award recipient, our most hearty congratulations on receiving the Firehouse Magazine Award of Valor. And this is the Firehouse Magazine right here. It's a national publication. Like I said earlier, and I believe a couple months ago, it's on probably every coffee table in firehouse across the nation. So this annual program is the largest of its kind in the United States. And they receive hundreds of nominations from across the country. And we're very honored to be recognized. They sent us a $500 check in recognition of that, and Peter Matthews is the editor, highly thought of individual in the fire service, and he said, "Thank you for being the shining example of what the fire service represents, and for helping make your community a safer place. Once again, we salute you." Signed, Peter Matthews. So, anyway, I'm requesting that we accept this check for $500.
Motion by Alderman Snow,
I'll
second by
second it.
Alderman Porter. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Done, and will be forwarded to council for final approval. Congratulations, Chief.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. As soon as our technical expert gets the laptop booted up for our finance director, we will discuss the budget review, general administration, capital, and salaries.
Okay, we'll get this up and running here, and we are going to start with general fund revenues. And then we will go on to general fund expenditures, the recap, then we'll hit the new initiatives, our capital expenditures, our personnel, just got a full evening here.
Can everybody see that okay? Feel free to, okay, if you want to move your chair so you can see, you can do that too. I know.
Okay, we're on page 1 under our general fund revenues. The only thing I really wanted to highlight here under operating transfer in, you'll notice for fiscal year 2020, which we're working on right now, there is, right here, I'll try and put my little hand over it. There's a 0, which means that we're not having to use any reserves to balance our budget. You'll notice in previous years, the last few years, we have had to use some reserves to balance. So this year, so far, is a 0. We'll move on to page 2. Only thing to comment here is just that this year property tax levy, that'll remain exactly the same as last year. Some of these pages, I may not stop at everything if there isn't anything really important to mention. Obviously, if you have a question, let me know. I'll try and highlight the points that I think are the most important for you. The next page I was going to go to is 5, which is our municipal infrastructure maintenance fee. This is part of our telecommunications, part of our utility tax that we receive for telecommunications, our phones. As you'll notice, this is the utility tax that continues to go down every year as landlines aren't being used. People are pooling their cell phone plans. So this revenue source continues to decrease. So just wanted to point that out. Next page we're going to look at is page 6. This is our state income tax. The IML helps us with these estimates every year. January, February, we receive estimated figures that we should be using per capita by IML and their researchers that have done all their research and done their statistics, and this is the help that they give us, which we greatly appreciate. One thing to comment here for that the state has not fully restored our local government distribution fund to us. If you recall, 2 years ago, the state took 1% of our 10%, so basically 10% of the money that we received for income tax, they took it and kept it. Last year, they gave us back half of that, but they have continued to keep the remaining 5%, so which for us comes out to about $135,000 a year. So,
and the new governor's intent is to continue to keep it at
that's what I'm hearing.
9%. IML will continue to lobby to get it back to the full 10.
So you'll notice our income tax is still doing okay, which just means our state is doing better as far as employment. But obviously, that $135,000 would be nice to have where it should be back here in our own city.
We owe a bit of a thank you to Fiat Chrysler America. Last year, they bonused all 5,008 employees out here $2,000, which is $10 million right out of the box. This last month, they approved bonuses for another $6 million, which will be $30 million over the next year. And it doesn't, not all of the people that work at Chrysler obviously live in Belvedere, but there's enough of them that they're making more money, and it's helped the income tax figure. But so in the last, counting last year, the 2,000 and the 6,000 this year, that's $40 million into our regional economy because they onshored profits. And so that's an enormous help to our regional economy in terms of disposable income for workers.
Okay, moving on. Our next one is our home rule sales tax. This is our new half cent that went into effect on January 1st. This is a educated estimate, is what I'm going to call it. We won't restart receiving revenue from this until April. So that is when I expect us to receive our first distribution from the state. And obviously, hopefully we'll have passed our budget by then, but I'm optimistic that this is a good number. Our next page is our regular municipal sales tax that we currently receive. So out of what used to be that 7.75, 1 cent of that comes back to the city. So 6.25 goes to the state. We get 1% of that back. And if you recall, we have a school district sales tax of 1%, as well as the county's public safety tax, which is a 0.5%. So this number has started to increase again, which is good. That's good for us. This is a great revenue source that we depend on. Just a tidbit to point out, if you look on the sheet and you go all the way up and you look at the actual for fiscal year 08, for 2008, here in fiscal year 20, we are finally almost back to what it was in 2008. So in your head, you might be thinking, oh, that's great, we're almost back to 2008. It took us 12 years to get back to what our revenue was back then. So if the recession hadn't happened, this year's number should really be more like $4.6 to $4.8 million. So just something to compare it to, that recession hurt us that bad, that number should be way higher than what it was in 2008.
And of note is that hasn't meant that the price of doing business has gone down or stayed flat. Every year, the price of doing business has gone up. So it's a bad equation.
Okay. Moving on again, let's see, page 10. This is local use tax. This revenue source has also continued to go up over the last few years. This has to do with our online sales. When people are purchasing things over the internet, a big jump you'll notice from the current fiscal year to next year is due to the South Dakota versus Wayfair, along with Illinois adopting the Marketplace Fairness Act. So this is where out-of-state retailers are now going to have to start paying the sales tax that they have not had to pay before. And that went into effect in October. So we're just now starting to see some of the benefits of that. So that will be helpful. Next page, page 11, this is our new local motor fuel tax, which is doing quite well. We were anticipating, I was conservatively budgeting around $300,000, but we are doing significantly better than that, which is great. About 22% of the revenue coming in is from the tollway. So basically, you can look at this number and know that at least 22% of that are most likely people that don't even live here that are paying this tax to us. Moving on, replacement tax. This one's a little harder to budget. This is your corporations, your trusts that are paying taxes into the state. It's divvied up. The state divvies it into different pieces and piles, and the formulas change all the time as to what percentage gets put into the replacement tax, which then comes back to us. It kind of goes up and down a little bit. So they were anticipating the share of replacement tax to be lower by about 5%, so that's why I budgeted a little bit lower. And out of that replacement tax, we are required that a certain percentage of it goes back to the pensions, including police, fire, our IMRF, and the library. Let's see, if we look at page 16, unless anybody has any questions.
Could we go,
Alderman Snow.
could we go back to 15,
Sure.
which I think you're on? You're on it already. Okay. So, one of the things that I see on here is the liquor license. We get $10,000 for new liquor license, and because we have the moratorium on the number of gaming establishments, that is lower than it really needs to be. I just want to let you guys realize by putting a limit on the number of gaming establishments, in order for them to actually function as a gaming establishment, they have to get a liquor license. So we're missing out on $10,000 each time that doesn't occur. And for every one that fails, we'll just say 2-3 years later, somebody else is going to take that spot and fill it, and that's another 10,000. Also, it fills vacant spots in the city as far as retail locations.
Point. Okay. Move on to amusement machines. This is, you'll see the big increase in revenue here. This past year, you changed the cost per machine, per gaming machine, from 100 to 500. So that increase in revenue correlates into this line item. I'm also including all 30 establishments because I think we plan on hitting that 30 max sometime here in the next
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
They were just, the state was just here and looking at the people who had applied for the permits and stuff. George Sabino called me last week and said they'd been by him, so they let them stack up and then they come and approve them in bunches. So I suspect we'll get a bunch approved all at once. We've had some people just back out of the thing totally. So Alderman Sanderson.
Thanks, Your Honor. So, so we just increased $63,000 from the year before, right, Becky?
Correct.
So that kind of overrides a little bit what Alderman Snow brought up about not having more establishments, because we have increased our revenue quite a bit already because of the increase in the machines.
Well, and there's another point that I think everybody needs to be aware of. There's rumblings again that Rockford's going to get a casino license where the clock tower was. There's a powerful group of financial interest folks that have some weight in Springfield that may get that license done. And if they do, we're going to have a lot of our gaming stuff go empty because people can get in the car and go to the casino instead of going to the little neighborhood kind of place. So it'll be interesting to see what happens the next couple of years. And Beloit's getting a casino too, so it's like the whole world is nuts, but okay.
And on to page 21. If you have any questions in between, let me know. This is our video gaming. Our average revenue per month is about $28,000, being conservative. So we're estimating that number at $336,000 for next year. $22 is our cable franchise fee. This will go up a little bit. As you recall from last month, the city settled the agreement with Comcast regarding some of their address discrepancies that were taking place. However, I did notice even before that was settled that some of the revenues had gone down as technology increases and there's more options out there, your Hulu, your Netflix, all those things. People are jumping ship, I think, off cable and trying to be more cost effective. So even though we're going to see some of the increase from the addresses being corrected, I think we're still going to see a decrease in our cable revenues due to all the other options out there.
Becky, what, page 23, what is that page all about?
These are our PEG fees. We don't receive these all the time. We received some in 16, 17, and partial in 18. It's an agreement with Comcast. That's our public educational government, and these are the fees we receive for our equipment for Channel 20. Correct, Mike?
Yes, but Becky, those should have actually terminated by now.
Yes, they did.
Right. so
That's
we
why
won't-
there's a zero.
Right, won't be seeing those in the future.
Okay, I was going to go to page 27. These are our tipping fees. These numbers are sometimes hard to budget for. This has to do with our, William Charles and the tipping fees that they pay to the city. We're paid per ton. It's a certain dollar amount, and it increases every year with CPI. We send them a new letter at the beginning of every year with their charge is to us, and we receive a monthly check from them. When all the construction was going on 990, our checks are pretty large, as you can see looking back in some of those years, 14, 15, 16. Went down a little bit in 17, they're back up in 18 and 19, so.
Where the Plody Quarry annexed into the city, that you could add $100,000 the first year to that amount. And because they got a very distinct feeling after talking to our council that you guys were not going to approve it, they will stay in the county. They're looking to relicense in the county, and that's just lost revenue for us. Quarry's not going anywhere. Quarry's not getting shut down. It's not going anyplace. But the county's going to get the money instead of us. Yes, Alderman Freeman.
So that new quarry on Ibsen Road, when are they going to be starting to mine that, and when will we see some tipping fees from that?
Peace.
As soon as they start mining, they'll start paying the tipping fees. That's a much smaller operation. You'll see nowhere near, we're just seeing a Plody. That is completely up to them as to when they actually start mining.
He got himself started a whole lot of projects all at once, and he's trying to get the whole gas station area out there by the high school finished up now and get, the car wash in and the other retail in and stuff like that. So we don't know for sure when he's going to start.
Okay. Just going to go to page 31. Oh, actually, 29 first, I'm sorry. This just shows our interest income, and just showing that with interest rates starting to go up, that we're actually starting to see what I would consider real revenue to help our general fund. So my estimated return is about 2.2% on our CDs. Let's see, now we can go to 31. This is operating transfer in. This just shows you again that we aren't going to have to use any reserves at this point for next year's budget. We're not. Nope. That's really it that I had for revenues. Most of these others that are in your packet are ones that we've already discussed. Some are police, some are fire, some are street. Just because they're general fund, they get included in this spreadsheet. I will go on to expenditures, unless there is a question. So here on page 1, let's see, over here, you'll notice for the projects, for the infrastructure projects that we have for possibly budgeting for next year, most of it is going to be transferred to the capital fund to pay those, rather than paying them out of the general fund. So you'll see that later on in here as we go. Let's see. Page 4 just starts with salaries of your elected officials. Page 5 is some of the salaries of your administration.
Alderman Snow.
So, on the salaries for yourself, the finance, and the city attorney, down below, it talks about the 25% coming from, I'm assuming, the city sewer and water. So that number at the top, is that the total, or do we need to add those amounts together?
That number at the top is the total, the 281,423. And then we subtract out the 47,861 because that money is transferred in from water and sewer. And then we add back in the interns to give you your 238,362. Okay. These next few slides are benefits. We have our health insurance. This is not just some of the city administration. This also covers your retirees. Dental. Here again, I'm just going to kind of swing through some of these if you have any questions. Our life insurance, health insurance reimbursement. This just offsets part of the expenditures from the insurance that are paid back to us from the library and from the retirees. Meetings and conferences, that stays the same as last year. Stays the same. Maintenance of buildings. Hopefully there aren't any roof repairs. I got a big 0 next to that one, so.
Not quite.
Well, the trim.
Brent, you want to?
There's trim, and then there's some more, there's a little bit more of the membrane work they have to do around a couple of the outlets on the roof. The weather got cold enough where they couldn't do that anymore, so we're just waiting for the, to warm back up enough.
Waiting for
warm
the
enough
thaw.
to finish that.
That's our maintenance of equipment. That's our copy machine, AED. Legal. Our other professional services, this is where we have to budget our payments to Azavar. If you remember all the revenues that they've recovered for us, they are owed, as part of their contract, 45% of that for another 2 years. So we'll be budgeting to pay them their share. These are the revenues that they collected from Comcast, our sales tax, ComEd, part of our utility tax, and they're still not done. There's still a couple others outstanding that they're working on. Utilities and telephone. Codification of the code book. Cell phones. This is office supplies. You'll notice an increase here under computers and software. Our city attorney / IT person could probably tell you a part of that reason for the increase. The other part is we're looking at a new payroll system and some time and attendance software, so we have that budgeted in here. Obviously, once we go to purchase or pick out a firm to purchase the software from, we will come back to you with all that information. Mike, did you want to briefly explain?
I haven't looked at this in a month. There's a bunch of new initiatives which we're undertaking as far as the IT side goes. One of which is the end of life occurring with some of our email servers and things like that, so we're having to relicense those and think about either migrating up into the cloud or having to repurchase new licenses and new equipment for that. Another big expense, which we're actually incurring some of in this budget year for water and sewer, is actually something you may want to keep in mind for at home too. Microsoft will no longer support Windows 7 after January 1 of next year, which means they will not supply any new fixes for any bugs that are found in the software, which allow hackers to get into the system. Every single machine, but a very few in this building, and the water department and the sewer department, and basically the entire city, excuse me, with the exception of the PSB, runs on Windows 7, so we're having to replace all the computers to try and avoid that. We've already taken some steps to shore up our systems. As we've talked about earlier, you guys approved some recent purchases to help with threats coming in from the outside, but as you can probably imagine, that is a never-ending battle.
Thank you. Oops. This is our miscellaneous, just to highlight where we have plugged the opioid grant writing that you approved a couple weeks ago. That $10,000 is plugged in there, as well as our city subsidy to RMTD.
Yes.
The opioid, so the one that got approved a couple weeks back, that's not coming out of 2019?
Correct. That's for next year.
And we've made arrangements with them to bill us on a quarterly basis.
Okay, let's see. Our transfer out, this is our line item as to where, when we're moving everything over to the capital fund, your fire truck lease payment, all your vehicles and equipment, the road and stormwater projects, our debt certificates. So the total is, $1,763,646. It'll get transferred to capital fund at this point in time, unless you make any changes. Okay, so that's all I was really going to go over here, and then I will go to there's a one-pager that says recap on it, general fund recap. What I wanted to point out here, if you go to the bottom of that recap sheet, you'll see what with my little hand here, what our balance is. So as you go forward today, looking at the new initiatives, any capital that may not already be included in the budget, anything you wanted to add or subtract, our remaining balance to work with at this point in time is $142,841. So that is something to think about as we go forward. So if you would like next, we can go right into what I would call new initiatives, which will look like this. It's a 2-page document. It says new initiatives fiscal year 20 on it. Yeah, it might not have a page number on it because it's a separate document.
It did not have holes in it, so it wouldn't have been in your...
So, new initiatives, I kind of explained what a new initiative is towards the bottom. They're considered new expenses that are ongoing from year to year. So capital expenditures are not on this list. Those items above that are highlighted in yellow have already been figured into the 2020 budget. Obviously, you can remove them if you wish to do so. Those items not highlighted are not included. So if you were to add anything that's not highlighted, you'd be taking that out of the remaining $142,000 balance.
Alderman Snow.
So I noticed we got a new one, the downtown facade grant for $16,800, and was wondering where that came from, because if I recall right, the facade program that was used a long time ago using part of the liquor license money didn't seem to get a whole lot of great attraction and tread and usefulness, in my opinion. And quite frankly, I'd just assume put that money back into the 50/50 program for the sidewalks and get more sidewalks repaired around the city. I think that would be more productive. That's just my personal opinion.
Couple of things. It's probably difficult to think back to, the beginning of financial year 2014 or fiscal year, or the calendar year 2013, and remember what downtown looked like then. And then fast forward to what downtown looks like now. And we've had 30-some new businesses open up. One of the things that we're hearing from business people is, why doesn't the city have some kind of a program to help small business people? So 5% or $16,800 isn't going to change the world, but it is an accommodation to show that, look, we do want to attract more small business. We do want to help. And it's an effort to show good faith that we want to help people when they invest in downtown. And there are some facades in downtown that desperately need to have some paint or a little bit of stonework or those kinds of things. Becky and I thought that this was a good place to start. I wish we had 10 times as much to do that, so we could attract higher level small businesses to come here. We've done the sidewalks. We paved State Street. We've got new plantings. We've got a lot of new businesses. So it just seemed a natural thing. Most communities have some kind of a fund to attract and keep businesses that locate in their downtown area, because all downtowns are challenged. Our downtown isn't quite as challenged as a lot of cities our size, and you wouldn't know that unless you go visit them. On the other hand, because we have not had any initiatives to offer, and we keep voting down common sense things like sidewalk cafes where you can get a bottle of beer, we're keeping out higher end downtown businesses that would produce significantly more taxes and revenue for the city that could be turned around and put into those types of things. Just go look at any of the little communities that are booming. And I mean, Genoa, look at what they've done, and they have programs to help their local merchants. You look across the suburbs, the westernmost suburbs, and the towns that have for 2 decades been putting money into it. When you look at where they started and where they are now in their revenue from taxes, it's off the charts. They can afford to do anything that they want to do. They don't have to go with their tail tucked between their legs and hope that, IDOT's going to throw them some crumbs for a grant to do something, or have the highest unemployment in the state to get the attention of getting something done. I mean, we have some choices to make. We have choices because we've been able to reinvest in the community and pay cash and not borrow money, to be able to move ahead and think of the future and be ahead of the curve for a change. And if we don't, the same thing that happened in 2008 is going to happen again the next time there's any kind of a hiccup in the economy. Development's going to jump right over us and go to the places that are upscale and moving up the ladder and not staying flat or going backwards. And we've invested a lot of time and effort, very sensibly into this community, into the things that are important, public safety, public works. And so paying a little bit of money from the money that we get from gaming to try to offer something to those folks that are willing to invest their own dollars in the community, to me, is common sense, but then again. Becky?
So I'm going to put two hats on right now. I got my finance hat on and I have my historic preservation hat on. So coming from a historic preservation point, and Gina does a lot with this program as well, we have a historic preservation grant program that we started about 5 years ago. So all of the fundraiser that Historic Preservation does, all these local merchants that are in the historic district can apply for grants through us. Ours are smaller though, they're about 1,000 is the max, and it has to be a 50-50 match. Just this year, we've upped it to 2,500 because there's so many properties out there that want to take advantage of it, and we don't have the money to do it. So, so we do have a lot of business owners downtown that want to participate and want to make their properties better. They just don't have all the funding to be able to do this. Obviously, we would come back before you. We have a whole application process, and obviously, your vote would be the final vote on what projects we do and don't do, you know, with the recommendation from staff and from Historic Preservation. But the properties are there. We thought maybe let's just try it for a year and see. The maximum amount is $5,000 per grant. So, and this is, you know, it's kind of a win-win because you're reinvesting in downtown and you're increasing property values. So if somebody spends $10,000 on their building exterior, this is all exterior work, not interior, that could be a win-win. So obviously, we're asking for this to get put in the budget. We would come back before you at a later date with a whole plan, the application, and all that, and just to try and see how it goes. That way the historic preservation dollars can go back towards helping homes rather than the commercial. So this grant program would be for commercial, and historic preservation could focus back on their smaller grant dollars for the residential properties.
Gina?
And just to touch base on what Becky said and what Alderman Snow said, the historic preservation grants for landmark properties only. There's several properties downtown and adjacent to downtown that are not landmark, that are not eligible. I get phone calls quite often from people thinking about locating into a vacant storefront, and the first thing they say is there any help with getting the windows put back in? Because stuff like that makes a massive impact on a building, but it is very costly. So this would help with just making all those buildings more inviting. And me and Becky have been talking the boundary lines. Is it downtown, or would we include like Pleasant Street and some of the offshoots? Buchanan Street isn't in the district. And then to go on what Alderman Snow said, in the past, I know there was one. The language regulating the facade program was pretty vague. We've been working on new language that would make sure the funds are used appropriately and for the projects that you want to see. And a good example is when the TIF district expired, all that money had to be used the year it expired, and that's when there was that massive repainting of the storefronts downtown and repairs, and those business owners were very thankful to have that TIF money, and all of it got used. I don't think any of it fully expired. We were able to use it all because the owners were very eager to participate in that program, and the facade program would act a lot like that.
It was administered by the people in this room, not by a manager of Main Street. So this is up to us to make those decisions, essentially you guys to vote on each project. Yes, Alderman Sanderson.
Thanks, Your Honor. Yes, and if I remember right, I mean, some of the older programs we had they weren't just facades, some of them were inside. And I think the taxpayers get more of a bang for their buck for what's on the outside because everybody can see what the improvements are, and it makes everything look better. So I like this idea that it's a facade program as opposed to all, the business owner's got to take care of his inside of his building, and he's got to take some pride in that too.
Some of those monies were spent incorrectly. and were not meant to be spent on inside fixtures. But again, it was administered by somebody other than the council directly, and that's why I think we always need to be the ones to administer money that comes out of taxpayers' pocket, right here in this room. Yes, Alderman Snow.
And if I heard it once, I heard it a boatload of times. We had facade money that got used for improper materials that were not historic for the downtown preservation deal. So we just want to make sure we don't wind up with, again, looking at that avenue when we go to do this.
Yes, and I know what project you're talking about, and when we reworked the language, we kept that project in mind to make sure it would not happen again.
And it's a reimbursable grant program, so the work's done, you've looked at it before they get a check. If they didn't do what they were supposed to do,
No check.
no check. Okay, so if there's, I think we wanted to start up here at the top with our Assistant Fire Chief. All that would need to be budgeted for 2020 is $20,000, which would be for a new firefighter. I have a timeline that I'd like to put up. I think that would, what would you like to put up first, Chief? Or what would you like to see first?
Oh, I was going to go with that fourth out of my pages. I put in front of everybody 4 pages, Belvedere Fire Department Assistant Chief position. I got them stapled together. Everyone should have one. These are in the previous budget discussion that I had with the council. These are some of the points that I hit on. I did not get them to you in writing, however, so I do now, and I put some of this, for instance, on the very first one, and I won't go through them all, but it's definitely there for your reading. Our department is run by one administrator and his administrative assistant, that being me, okay? And it goes on, and I talk about other things, some of the things we're missing out on as a fire department, missing out on producing and implementing standard procedures that would also be considered to be best practices. Quite often we got to make SOPs up as the need arises. Here also just recently, I'm just going randomly here, missing out on reimbursable classes. Like we just did a FAE, Fire Apparatus Engineer class for the fire department. And it come to find out that we were able to get reimbursed for that, and we did not know that. So there was money lost there. Often I'm paying overtime to complete administrative tasks. One of the big ones right now is increasing burden on it's a time-consuming process to comply with the state training requirements. The Office of State Fire Marshal has made drastic changes in the way that we do training in the state of Illinois. It's more important than ever to provide really good documentation. Let's see. I provided my first two needs here. 24 or 48-hour shifts, they prohibit efficient production. Officers sometimes are only working 1 or 2 weekday shifts, and sometimes if they take a Wednesday off, I don't see them all week. So what I'd said there, see administrative officer and line officer survey. That'd be the second page. And this is just so you all would have some information as to what other fire departments are doing in our area. We fall in, on page 2 here, we fall in right between, probably the best, between Freeport and Sycamore. So I would hope that everyone could go ahead and read that. If you have any questions pertaining to this, please feel free. I'm down in my office every day, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So I'm down there. Call me. Be happy to talk to you. Come and visit me.
Chief, can I add something? If you see here, we're the only department around that doesn't have deputy chiefs or battalion chiefs or whatever. When you start thinking about this, the fire service goes a certain way. We made the decision in this community decades ago to have a professional fire team in this community and not to go to having this be District 1 again with a volunteer fire department. The fire department here doesn't fight all that many fires, and they're the first to admit it. They make the medical calls. They also are renowned throughout the region for our dive team, our extrication team, our hazmat team. The other fire companies call on us when there are issues. We've watched these guys perform, and I'll tell you, the fire department is organized differently. Captains have different roles than they did before. Lieutenants have different roles than they had before. And so, you know, I have sat on the council and sat in this chair for a number of years, and I think it's time that we look at what really the fire service needs moving forward. And also when we start looking at, we have the personnel currently that we have somebody who would make a fabulous deputy chief. And we're not asking for this at all in this year's budget. But in order to plan to have this in next year's budget, we need to hire a firefighter because everybody will move up, as always happens when someone gets promoted. So this is a 2-year plan, and Becky can better explain for you perhaps, but it's all laid out in the handout that you have and the stages that we would do to achieve this. And continuity in going forward with this fire department, having the best fire department in the region, I think is an important thing for us to do. Marcia?
Yeah, Al, can you tell me what's the difference between a deputy chief and an assistant chief? Is that the same thing?
It's the same thing. Yep. Just different terminology for some departments.
Okay. Questions on this side? Alderman Snow.
Well, I commend the fire department, and I appreciate your workload, Al. The problem is that in the overall scheme of things, this is going to cost the taxpayers in the long run every year over $100,000, and it's just going to perpetuate forever. And so it's a hard pill to swallow when we've got a lot of other things, particularly infrastructure, that need to be looked at and taken care of. So I understand your hardship, but based on the financial situation that we're in, and all the stuff that we do have going on, I would have to vote no at this point. I'm sorry.
Anybody else? Yes.
If you haven't, I'm not sure if they have this in their packet of what you gave them. They do, okay, so you have a picture of the timeline. Because I know it's kind of hard to think about when things would have to happen. Like I said, all you'd be approving in this year's budget is the $20,000 for the firefighter to cover 3 months. In June, we'd be coming back to you with an ordinance to create the assistant chief position that doesn't exist. February, he'd be hiring the new firefighter. Next April is when you would be asked to approve the 2021 budget, including the assistant chief position and those expenses. And then the assistant chief would be appointed in May 2020. So that was kind of the timeline and why it's coming before you now, even though technically it doesn't have to be budgeted till next year.
Yeah, there's many moves that have to be made prior to a position like that to occur on the fire department, so.
Just no questions? Alderman Porter.
Yeah, are we in a position right now where we could actually use another firefighter? I mean, is there a certain number of firefighters you normally have for a population, or, I mean, if we were to go ahead and hire a new firefighter?
We haven't, we're still, from back in 2008, we're still down to 2 firefighters. We've gone on with our present staffing, and we continue to, we're just waiting for the time to be right. I feel like with an assistant chief position, we can get some of the grants that we're missing out on. There's a SAFER grant out there that started on 15th of February. It stops on the 22nd of March. Grants like that, I'd love to be able to get them all and do the work and the legwork and stuff to receive those, but presently I can't. So I'm getting small little grants here and there, but one like SAFER grant takes a lot of work to involve. It's really involved, and right now I can't do it.
Alderman Freeman.
I don't understand how Sycamore has a smaller population than Belvedere. They have the same amount of firefighters that we have. They actually fight less fires than we do, and they're able to afford not one but 2 deputy chiefs. I think it's high time Belvedere stepped up and gave our fire department the help that they need and deserve. I'll be voting yes, Al.
There are 2 initiatives that administration of the city is charged with. The number 1 is public safety. Number 2 is infrastructure. We try to address those every year, and every year we hear why we can't and why we shouldn't and so forth and so on. Salaries are going to go up. You know, we don't pay our people here what people make in other communities. You know, our administrative people, our fire and police aren't paid starting wages that are paid in other. And why do they stay with us? Because we have a great bunch of folks in this community, and they stay with us for years and years. And you start looking at the salaries, and that's why the salaries are at those levels. They've been with us 10, 15, 20 years, and they get the raises over time by being loyal. Alderman.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with one of the aldermen, because this has been a long time overdue. We do need a deputy chief. I mean, our chief is busy enough. He can't sit there and write grants, and Marcia's totally right. We should have somebody helping our chief. He can't do all the work like that.
And in planning for the future, too. If you have a continuity where you have a deputy or assistant chief and the chief retires, then it's pretty normal for a deputy chief to rise to the chief's position. So grooming somebody to be ready to do that, Al's not going to work until he's 75. You're not? I shouldn't have to. Additional questions or comments? Hearing none. Do you have something else you want to?
Yeah, and, you know, in your comment there about succession, you know, I was, when I was appointed to the fire chief position, I had like a 2-week succession training. At that time, it was pretty daunting. I'm learning all the time. I'm still learning up to this day. But to have a person right behind me to step into that role, I think it's like, you know, just being consistent and that succession is so important. And I don't think we really realize that sometimes how important that vital role is. That person right behind the guy, the top person. So as a chief.
Chief, I'm also sure you probably weren't taught the way you should have been anyway, because you weren't behind the chief that was in, like as his deputy or assistant. So I agree with you. We need somebody that's being groomed underneath you and understands the job right away.
Any further comments on this? It'll come back on the 11th, did you say, Shauna?
March 11th.
March 11th for the final vote on the budget.
I guess I would ask tonight, on some level, once we get through all of this, to maybe get a consensus or a yay or nay as to what you would like me to include in the budget, if there's anything you want me to take out, just so I have a little bit of direction going forward.
Okay. Becky?
Moving through our list, we're at community development. First off, and the mayor can probably chime in as well, was a wage increase for our planner. This would be Gina.
One of the things that has come to light since we've started to become more active in planning civic events like Heritage Days, and now we're going to be taking over Hometown Christmas in its entirety for the planning probably. Gina's already doing this job and putting in lots of hours that she didn't get paid for. So my idea is to add her to her title, Community Development Planner and Event Planner, and giving her a little more money for doing the work. so an additional 2% plus an additional $2,500. Anybody that's familiar with City Hall or is familiar with any or is involved in any of the events that we produce every year, every time you turn around, there's Gina. And she's carrying the water for everybody. She works harder than anybody I know. And I think it's a long time coming, and she needs to be rewarded for her work. I have one more request also that's not on this list. I am also requesting an additional 5% raise for Ms. Tobin. She has not had a significant raise since she came to us. And when I've discussed it with her over the past year, she says, no, we'll take care of everybody else first. It's a funny thing. When I became the mayor, I had a number of department heads who kept telling me that. Don't worry about us. Let's take care of this one and take care of that one for the work that they do. You can't ask for better people in positions of leadership than that. But it's time. Becky is the lowest paid finance director in the region. And in my estimation, she's the very best. And she wears a lot of hats. And so I would say instead of the 80,924 for financial year 20, it would be 81,886, which is an additional 5%, which is about $3,400 or $3,400 more. And those are my recommendations for additional. Everybody else, you know, gets the same as we bargained with all of the other union employees. So I think you have to reward people for the work that they do. And if we continue, I'll tell you this right now, if somebody came calling and wanted to hire Becky Way, not that she would go because of her loyalty, but her position with her experience and her education, it's $150,000 to $60,000 starting salary in most cities, including like the city of Rochelle or Cherry Valley. I mean, it's, you know, we just don't pay our people. And yet, you know, they stick with us, and we're very lucky that they do because we have a high degree of excellence in this community with our leadership. No, we'll just, when the budget comes back for final approval, we'll pick at it then. But it would be very helpful if you would communicate to my office or someone in administration how you feel about these things. And for anybody, Becky's raise, communicate to Becky about how you think about these things. About Becky's raise, communicate with me directly and let me know how you feel about it. Because we have a little money, again, that we're working to do some of these things with, and we kind of like to know how the council feels about that in the long run for the 11th. Yes.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I wanted to thank Becky for putting these comments in the different areas. It definitely helps when we're going through it to try to figure out what all these things are. So,
you're welcome. Great. Moving on. Thank you very much, Mayor. Our next one under community development is our increase for our electrical inspector. You may remember last year, I think they were asking for an increase in this position as well. This is R&R Electric right now. They at $17,500, but more. And Gina could probably speak to this as well. Electric is definitely, there's more permits being issued and more work involved than there is on the plumbing side. So, no, Gina.
Yeah, there's 30 to 40% more electrical permits than plumbing. And then again, the customer service and the professionalism that R&R has shown this last year and a half has been amazing. Extremely easy to get on the phone. They come in every day. You didn't call us, did you need us for something, or we were in the neighborhood, wanted to stop by. As soon as they do the inspection, they call us to let us know if it's a pass or fail. We don't have to wait days to know the outcome. The residents have been very happy with them. When they go in, they're very nice and helpful, and instead of just saying, I'm failing you, go away, they'll sit there and say, I'm failing you because of this, and this is how you fix it. So they've really shown a high level of customer service for our residents and professionalism for other staff in City Hall. And they, again, are 30 to 40% more than the plumbing inspector as far as the number of permits.
I actually, one comment, I actually have this, I put total contract would be 18.5. 18.5 is what their current is, so next year it would be 19.5 if this was approved. If there's any questions on that, we'll go forward. Street Department, Mr. Anderson?
It's called a new initiative, but I would, I guess, refer it to as an old initiative. Back in 2007, we had 9 maintenance workers. We're currently at 7. We've been down 2. The total cost for a new employee, additional employee, at the street department, as you see there, is $90,796. We are showing a surplus right now of the $142,000, which is why you're seeing the request now, and you haven't seen it previously, because I didn't think it was prudent to be doing that when we were borrowing from our reserves to meet our obligations on an annual basis. Just a footnote, as far as this year's budget goes, the street department is a 4.6 reduction based on the numbers that I presented to council. The street light portion, it's 20,000 less proposed than it was last year. Our forestry budget is a reduction as well of 30,000, so I'm thinking with the reductions that are being proposed will more than pay for the additional position. This position will give us a total of 8 maintenance workers, which allows me to have 2 4-person crews, which means that with our equipment and available to us, we can actually have 2 excavations going at the same time in the street department in different parts of the city if we do need to do that. And with all the work that we have to do, that would happen quite often. That gives me a top man, a bottom man, an equipment operator, and a truck driver. So not only that, but it would provide an additional body for snow removal, improve our snow removal operations, quicken that pace up as well. So that's why the request you're seeing that this year for that to restore 1 position back to the street department.
Any questions for Brent there? Okay. If we are done looking at new initiatives, we can move on to our capital. Let's see. Capital schedule, there should be a document that looks like this. Let me make it bigger. So this breaks out fiscal year 20, 2021, 22, 23 that we know of. It just kind of highlights some of the other projects that are going to be asked for in the following budget years. For fiscal year 20, you'll see everything that you see here except for the mini pumper has already been included in the budget. So the mini pumper is the only thing I did not include. It'd be the first page of capital. I guess it does have a hole punch.
It's right behind page 64 or 65. Capital schedule. And it does have holes in it. So on the one of 65, it's behind page 65.
So this kind of breaks down from each department, the capital requests that were made, the ones that at this time I have included in the budget, and then obviously what's highlighted, the mini pumper that so far has not been included. Your total down here is $1,702,808. So I believe if you have any questions about any of this equipment, I believe the fire chief wanted to briefly discuss the mini pumper.
Thanks, Becky. Also, handouts, there's a picture of what it, a lot of people might not know what a mini pumper is. Everyone has a picture of it. And one of the things I wanted to bring to light again is the fact that we have a 2002 pumper right now of our Alexis, or I'm sorry, excuse me, our American LaFrance. It's a house at Station 2, and it's called Engine 102. It's a 2002, 17 years old. It's got 130,000 miles on it. Most places, most departments would have that phased out by now. That engine would have been gone and been reserve roll. We are still running it as a frontline engine. It's holding up, but I don't anticipate it holding up forever. So the reason I brought to you, or putting this out here tonight here, is that this is a idea, it's a model, it's a concept of us purchasing a fire apparatus that has the capabilities of the big engines, but in obviously a smaller footprint. That apparatus right there can do most anything that the big engines would be able to do, and it comes at half the cost. Today, a fire engine will cost us $500,000. As you all know, we're on payment number 4 of our new Alexis that we've purchased last year. This apparatus up here, this mini pumper, would cost about $225,000 roughly. And I just wanted everyone to get an idea as to what it is. If you ever have any questions, I'm available downtown anytime. Call me. I'll be happy to talk to you about this. I know this is a lot of stuff when you're not in the business to take in and consume, but I'd be happy to talk to you about this at any time.
Did you want to speak to what would happen when we have to replace?
Yes. As I had mentioned before, Ladder 150 is housed over at Station 2 as well. We purchased that back in 2011 as a replacement for an incident that we had with our old ladder truck. And if we have to replace that in the future, it's going to be in the near future. I imagine that same apparatus is going to cost us over $1 million. It definitely.
The point I was making is we have to have a ladder truck because we have high rises.
Yeah, we have a ladder truck in the platform because of the fact that we do have high rises and we have a number of major commercial industry. And I wanted to let everybody know that this is an idea that obviously I didn't think of it, but it's something that's out there. If engine 102 is to go down, for instance, we'd be forced to utilize ladder 150. And right now, ladder 150 has 40,000 miles on it since 2011. So my hopes are that if something 102 does go down, that we can utilize a mini pumper and that concept for, like I said, half the cost of purchasing a brand new fire engine. Any questions?
No.
Just looking at this looks like no offense, a glorified extended cab pickup truck. My concern would be the guys getting in and out of the vehicle with all the heavy gear that they get into the vehicle with currently, and they must have much larger doors to jump in and out. And that would be, my thought would be that has anybody actually participated, gone out to Beverly Hills, as it were, to see how it really functions in that regards, or if it's like, let's take the big truck.
No, so to answer your questions right there, it's an F550. It's Ford's large F series, and also we've had numerous mini pumpers come by the stations and the guys get in them. We don't put our gear on to get in them, but there's more leg room than what you would think. It's not a F-150.
Wouldn't the idea be to, when we're responding to traffic accidents and those kinds of things, that are not fire scenes that require the larger engine, that this would, and it would give us more life out of the ladder, so that we don't have to go $1 million, you know, as soon as we would. This is a 10-year-old idea that a lot of fire departments are now utilizing. So it would help with, because we answer all these medical calls and all of these accident calls, that this would be a more agile truck, that we can get there faster, it doesn't take up as much room at the scene. I mean, there's a whole list of reasons why. We've talked about this for several years. Alderman Sanderson.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, though I'm not a firefighter or anything, you know, if you're using that for going after the traffic accidents, you're probably gonna get better gas mileage on it too, I would imagine. I don't see what the gas mileage is compared to a bumper, but common sense probably tells you that it's gonna be a lot better on gas of, you know, going out to the expressway or wherever we have to go with it, and maybe even over terrain that a heavier truck can't get to if we had to respond somewhere.
Yeah, the fuel mileage would definitely improve greatly over what a big, you know, obviously a larger horsepower vehicle would do. It's 4-wheel drive. It's got it's got a 1,500 gallon per minute pump on it, so it's the same as what the big ones are running around with. You got the ability to carry anywhere from 300 to 500 gallons of water. Again, the same as what like Ladder 150 carries 300 gallons on board, and our engines 2 of the 3 carry 500 gallons. So.
Would you be taking it, keeping that in 6th Street Station so that it would be doing most of the responding on traffic calls?
Yeah, that would be housed at Station 2, right next to Ladder 150. In my mind, I feel it would be a perfect complement to the ladder truck.
Yes, Alderman Snow, sorry.
Just so you know, Al, I'm okay with this.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I was just wondering, at 225, that's the brand-new price. Do any of these ever show up on the used market in a good used one, or are they pretty high mileage?
Usually, I don't really leery of anything that's used in the fire service. There's a reason somebody got rid of it. And quite often, you know, to answer your question, Mr. Porter, yeah, you could come across one that's like in great, exceptional condition. It just didn't work for that department. But our findings usually are like, it's been used and maybe something was wrong. It could have been a lemon. Something was wrong with it, and they're getting rid of it. Okay.
We want to discuss where we might find the money for this, Ms. Tobin. Okay.
I've talked to the chief a little bit about some financing options. I've talked to him about breaking it up over 2 years. Didn't you say these take about 6 months to build?
Yeah, they're 6 months.
So there is possibly the opportunity of being able to pay for half of it in 2020 and the other half in 2021. Similar to when we bought the fire truck, we paid for it in pieces. We paid for the chassis, and then we paid for the equipment and things like that. So that is an option. To pay that initial down payment, the fire department does have about $200,000 sitting in capital from impact fees. I wouldn't want to deplete that in case there was an emergency of some sort, but possibly using half of it would be okay. That would still leave some money in case there was an emergency of some sort. And that way then we could budget for it the following year out of the general fund. I mean, maybe there'd be grant opportunity out there that we could look at to possibly pay for some of it as well.
Yeah, if we had a deputy chief to do the grant work. Yeah, Alderman Sanderson.
Yeah, just follow up on that too. What about warranties? What kind of warranties? And would the repair work, where would that be done? We wouldn't have to ship it up to Michigan or anything like that. What about the warranty? You know what kind of warranty it is?
I would have to look up the warranty on it. I would go out on a limb and say the pump is probably warranted just like like 5 years, like what a big engine would be. Some of the other things, though, I'd have to check on. Also, to repair here recently, we've been going over to Rockford Fire Department. They're trying to expand their ability to repair their own vehicles, and they're hiring more mechanics over there, so a lot of the local departments are taking their apparatus there to get fixed.
Additional questions or comments? Stovin?
I don't have anything else there. If anybody had any other questions about the other capital items that have been included in the budget so far? Otherwise, we can move on. We got one more page. Our last one would be the non-union personnel. This breaks down all of your non-union. This reflects a 2% increase, except where noted. Basically, the 2% has been included because that is the same as what your unions are going to be getting next year, with the exception of police. Theirs is 2.25. So you'll notice the police chief and the deputy chiefs, their increase is actually 2.25 because per contract they have to be 6% over the sergeants. If there's any question there. We call this Exhibit B because this is part of the ordinance when we bring the, oh, it's kind of small, hard to read. When we bring the budget ordinance in front of you. If there's any questions there, I can answer those. Otherwise, I don't have anything else for tonight. 2 weeks from tonight is when there'll be another opportunity to discuss the budget. If there's any changes, additions, anything before that, let me know. If you wanted to make any decisions on anything tonight, that's fine. Just know that I'll be working on the budget ordinance, because that will come before you the week after the 11th. Right, Shauna? So I'll only have a couple days to make changes and move things around there in order to get the ordinance ready. So anything we can do before that, that would be good.
In other words, it'd be very helpful if you all could communicate with us and let us know what you heard tonight that you're in favor of and what you're not in favor of, so we can get an idea what the consensus is as she starts to build the final budget, so that we can get Mike started on writing the ordinance and Becky started on writing the ordinance. It was an awful lot of stuff, and none of this was presented to you as fluff. I mean, these are things that, you know, it's not the first time you've heard these discussions. We need to pay our people living wage for the work that they do, because they do a great job for us. And, you know, sometimes I think, gosh, we're lucky because we don't have to pay what other people pay for not so good work. But at some point, you reward the people that take care of the citizens in this community. And I think the citizens in the community, if you talk to the majority of them on the street, would tell you they're tickled to death with what we're able to provide for them and the way that we do it. So it's been a long time coming. We're still short in a lot of areas in terms of just personnel, but we can't afford to add people except, you know, one this year and then maybe one next, you know. And it's been done very carefully, and when we have had the money and so forth. So if nobody's got anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Sanderson, second by Alderman Ratcliffe. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? Thank you. I'll be careful going home. It's slippery out there.